Hello, welcome to the Blue Poppy YouTube video channel. So today we're going to be talking about Bai Zhu. Bai Zhu is a fascinating medicinal. It's been used since ancient times. In ancient history, Bai Zhu and Zhu weren't differentiated from one another. They were both referred to as Zhu. And nowadays, Bai Zhu and Zhu are both differentiated from one another, but they both have a common feature in that they have a drying nature. Bai Zhu is primarily used from cultivated sources at the present time. In the past, wild product was available, but the wild population has been in significant decline, so it's no longer commercially available. China grows about 8 million kilograms of Bai Zhu per year, and so that's about the total market demand. It's one of the most prominent herbs in Chinese medicine, often reported within the top 10 herbs as far as the total volume. In Taiwan, Bai Zhu ranks about number 9 in terms of the total Chinese herbs imported. Taiwan imports about 500,000 kilos of Bai Zhu alone. So you've got a small little region with only about 23 million people, but using about 500,000 kilos of Bai Zhu. So that's only about 1/16 the entire global supply. So Bai Zhu is primarily used in Chinese medicine to fortify the spleen, to dry dampness. It's also used to treat edema, also used to check sweating, also used to treat diarrhea, also used to quiet the fetus. And the actions of Bai Zhu vary depending on the processing method that's used. Bai Zhu, when it's used in its crude state, tends to be more drying. And it tends to be better for treating wind, damp, and pediment pain, also better for drying dampness, also better for treating edema when it's used in the crude state. When it's used in the stir-fried state, and the stir-fried form, Chao Bai Zhu, is actually one of the most common clinical forms for Bai Zhu. In the stir-fried state, Bai Zhu is better for fortifying the spleen. And so oftentimes when we're using Bai Zhu clinically, if we're using it to fortify the spleen, the stir-fried form is preferred, whereas if we're using it to treat edema, the raw form is preferred. It's generally believed in the modern day that the drying nature of Bai Zhu is related to its essential oil content, and the essential oils are reduced by about 15% during the stir-frying process. So the stir-frying tends to moderate its drying nature. And stir-frying has been used since early on in Chinese medicine. Stir-frying was first recorded, stir-frying until yellow, was first recorded in Sun Tzu Miao's Qianjin Yifang, written around 700 CE or so. And then later forms such as stir-frying with bran emerged later, about 1,000 years ago in the Song dynasty, and then a variety of other forms have been used up to the modern day. Stir-frying with earth was actually also one of the earliest forms to emerge, also in the Song dynasty, also in the Tang dynasty. Similar time period to stir-frying until yellow. And so the stir-frying with different adjuvants tends to be used for slightly different purposes. When we use the product that's been stir-fried with earth, it tends to be the best for treating diarrhea. And the product stir-fried with earth, the earth that's used is actually Zhao Xintu. Zhao Xintu, sometimes called Huangtu or Fulonggan, is a medicinal of its own right in Chinese medicine. We often call it oven earth in English. It's the clay used inside the oven, used inside a traditional Chinese oven. So you have a particular type of clay that's absorbing a lot of heat from the oven process, and it's a particular clay that's used in processing other medicinals. And so that's what we mean when we talk about earth-processed or soil-processed Bai Zhu. And they're taking, for every 100 kilograms of Bai Zhu, they're taking about 20 kilograms of the oven earth, of the Zhao Xintu. And so they're first stir-frying the oven earth until it gets hot, and then adding in sliced Bai Zhu and stir-frying it. And then they sieve out, after it's been stir-fried, they sieve out the Zhao Xintu so that you have just the Bai Zhu remaining. And that process is somewhat similar for stir-frying with bran. When they do stir-frying with bran tends to be, they use honey-processed bran, and they put that in the wok, stir-fry it with the Bai Zhu, then sieve out the bran, and then collect the Bai Zhu. So the process is somewhat similar. When they're using the bran, they usually use about 10 kilograms of bran for every 100 kilograms of Bai Zhu. And the bran processed form is often called Chao Bai Zhu, but in practical use, Chao Bai Zhu is also made simply by taking normal Bai Zhu and putting it in a toaster oven. A lot of small Chinese herb pharmacies tend to do this themselves. They get the fresh product in, and then they immediately take half the batch and put half the batch in the toaster oven, bake it at a relatively low temperature for about 10 or 15 minutes or so until it gives off an aroma. It starts to change color on the surface. Once it's changed color, gives off an aroma, it's considered to be done. You take it out, let it dry. At one of the herb shops that I studied in, the boss was absolutely religious about the importance of using Chao Bai Zhu versus Sheng Bai Zhu in separate clinical applications. So I remember that we'd often have prescriptions coming in from outside practitioners. He'd just sort of look at it and shake his head, they don't know the Chao versus the Sheng Bai Zhu. And so he automatically would process half of it into the Chao Bai Zhu form. And for his own patients, that's always what they were using when used to fortify the spleen. That boss, as well as a number of other Chinese herb pharmacies here in America, also carry a product that's called Tian Sheng Zhu. Tian Sheng Zhu is what I've got here on the table here. This is the sliced product. And Tian Sheng Zhu is basically normal Baizhu, but the seeds from one of the main production regions taken and transplanted into a mountainous environment. So it's sort of like a half-wild Baizhu. This would be falling under the category of what people call Daodi Yaocai, authentic region medicinals, where Baizhu is considered to be one of the, you have over 400 herbs grown in Zhejiang province, but Baizhu is often considered one of the Zhe Ba Yao, the eight medicines of Zhejiang, because Baizhu is principally cultivated in the Zhejiang region. And one of the mountainous areas around there is where they raise the half-wild product. So that's basically taken by using the cultivated seed, growing it in the wild environment. And it produces a product that's somewhat sweeter and less spicy in taste. And it's considered to be just a superior grade medicinal. And it's often, again, processed by baking or stir-frying it to fortify the spleen. Baizhu in general, commercial Baizhu is graded based on size, based on the number of whole roots per kilogram. So the top grade Baizhu is basically anything that's 40 roots per kilogram and under is first grade. And then the second grade is between 40 roots per kilogram and 100 roots per kilogram. And then between 100 roots to 200 roots per kilogram would be the third grade. Fourth grade is anything smaller than 200 roots per kilogram. That's a little bit of the main part that I wanted to present today about Baizhu, just a little bit of extra additional information. So when you're out there using Baizhu, remember to use the Chao form, the stir-fried form, when you're using it to fortify the spleen. And then try to remember to use the Sheng form when you're using it to treat dampness and edema, keeping in mind that the dry nature of Baizhu is moderated by the stir-fried process. So when you want it to be less drying, use the stir-fried form. When you want it to be more drying, use the crude unprocessed form. Okay, thanks for watching our YouTube video. Thanks.